The Nature Journal is brought to you by SAPI, the global specialized cellulose, paper and packaging company.
Well, hi from me, Tim Neary, with this week's edition of our SAPI Nature Journal Express. I think it's time to take ourselves back and look at one of our early explorers of South and Southern Africa. Francois Levallois was born in French Guinea and he came to the South African shores in 1781. He was all of 28 years old and had been training in Europe as an ornithologist. On the 18th of December in 1781, there was really a festive air in the streets of Cape Town, as the young explorer was departing for the wilds of the Eastern Cape in absolute style. Levallois had an ostrich feather in his hat and 2 wagons packed with more travelling goodies than a whole gypsy train. Specimen drawers, guns and gunpowder, an elaborate kitchen setup, a dressing box, tents, tools and much brandy, beads and tobacco for barter. He bragged that he had enough clothing and linen to allow him to change 3 times a day. As he moved eastwards, his wagon train grew longer. In the Swellendam area, Levallois acquired a rooster which he used as a faithful alarm clock for his early morning rising. He also bought himself a tame chukma baboon called Kiers, and this became his travelling companion, security guard, food taster, as well as court jester. The first expedition took him east as far as the Great Fish River, and he was in the area around present-day Somerset East and Cookhouse towards the end of 1781. He kept journals but did not have an almanac, and was obviously a charming, yet eccentric and dashing young man who also collected trophies, fell in love, dined on exotic dishes, hunted big game, and, by the way, named a number of new bird species. Levallois' mission, in fact, was to collect birds, insects and animal species for a wealthy Hollander, who also happened to be the treasurer of the Dutch East India Company, which was very prominent in the 18th century South Africa. So well-sponsored and well-equipped, the jaunty Frenchman wandered through the territories that were considered hostile and dangerous. Completely unperturbed, Levallois behaved as if he was South Africa's first leisure tourist, and he marvelled at and recorded the country's vast landscapes, social habits of its indigenous people, as well as its wealth in wildlife. Levallois was the first white man to freely immerse himself of the wonders of South Africa. Many saw him as native, but his accounts of travelling through South Africa became the new, the more benign way Europe would view this part of the world. He picked up enough of the Khoi tongue to be able to converse with his companions, and in the evenings he and the faithful Kiers would join them at the campfire and listen to their stories. Levallois became infatuated with a young woman called Nerino in the Cox Kraal area of the Eastern Cape. His second journey to the banks of the Orange River in the Richtersveld was just as grandly executed, and at some stage involved hunting a full-grown giraffe. Well, at this point he also decided that he should take up taxidermy, and this was performed on the roadside. When he returned to France with his extensive collection and colourful records, Levallois affectionately branded South Africa as one of the most fascinating as well as exotic destinations in the world. Not much has changed. Levallois was amongst the first to consider the use of coloured plates of birds for his description. He mounted his bird specimens, preserved in arsenic soap, in lifelike positions, and the illustrations showed them in near realistic poses. His accuracy for depictions was shown when a fiscal shrike was put alongside an insect that had been impaled on a thorn. His description of bird behaviour was also considered to be pioneering. Levallois named the batelier after the French word for a tightrope walker. The distinctive movements of the wing that the bird makes in the air are said to be much like the adjustment that a tightrope walker would make to the balancing pole. He called the African fish eagle Forcifer, for its distinctive loud yelping calls made while throwing back its head. He was also the first to use musical annotation to describe birdsong. A very careful observer of behaviour, he was amongst the first to notice that the rosy-faced lovebird nested within the nests of the sociable weaver. It has since been suggested that he may have well been a major influence in the style and the art of John James Audubon. Levallois collected some 2,000 specimens of bird and subsequently published the 6-volume book between 1799 and 1808. Some of his specimens were later found to be fakes, made up of the parts of different birds, and he was discredited to a degree. In spite of this, his contribution to ornithology in Africa was immeasurable, and some of his specimens still exist in the museums of Europe. He wrote a highly dramatized account of his adventures, which was translated into 7 languages and became the bestseller of the time. One English translation, Levallois's Travels into the Interior Parts of Africa, was published in 1790. In 2008, the Van Riebeeck Society retranslated the first half of this book and published it with many footnotes and extra information as Francois Levallois Travels into the Interior of Africa via the Cape of Good Hope, Volume 1. As we also said, he was the first to use the colour plates for illustrating birds, and he preferred to use descriptive French names such as Bateleur for the distinctive African eagle. Levallois's Christostola is found in the area around Somerset East, and other birds still have the French names he attributed to them, including the Bateleur, as we've said. Levallois also gave his Khoikhoi mistress the name Nerina, the word for flower in her language, and he named the Nerina trogon for its beauty, which he said he compared to hers. There, of course, is Levallois's barbet, the cisticola, the cuckoo, parrot, the chargra, and of course the woodpecker. He was a brave experimenter, and he allowed a Hottentot medicine man to diagnose him when he fell ill and wrote of the successful treatment and cure. By travelling around South Africa, observing the wild and reflecting upon himself and mankind, it has been claimed that Levallois was the pioneer of a genre of travel writing, while also inventing the idea of a wildlife safari. Here's a little fact that you might not know. Levallois and other explorers carved their names in a cave on the west coast. Ironically enough, though, after his illustrious travels and publications, Levallois died a pauper in 1824. It is also, though, a lot of Levallois's writings and books that are used to this day to describe animals that occurred naturally in the area of, for example, the Karoo. And based on that, of course, is what animals have been allowed to be reintroduced to some of the areas. When I was working on Samara, introducing cheetah, we were able to take Levallois's books and look at some of the sketches and drawings and compare them to parts of the Great Cape Road that went eventually from Port Elizabeth to Graaff-Reinet and Graaff-Reinet all the way to Cape Town. So an interesting time for everybody. I must say that it's kind of strange, though, when you are walking across some of those landscapes and realize that centuries ago people were exploring them, taking notes, sketches, and a whole lot more. Even one of the areas of Samara where we find some of the sand art is absolutely incredible. And there, for example, was the woolly cheetah. The woolly cheetah we'll possibly touch on with when we do cheetah as a species. We're going to find a lot of fun, though, through the program, and we're going to do a lot of experiences that one has been able to have, very privileged experiences as well, and share those on with all sorts of folk. If you have some idea of anything that you would want included in the program, well, always drop an email to me at tim@neary.co.za, and that's Neary. We do a lot of tours around the countryside, and we always are looking for new experiences. Be they the history of the horses, for example, up in Kaapse Hoop, or as this, the history of the walks of Levallois. He did a second walk as well, but maybe we'll touch on that on yet another time. Can you imagine, though, walking across these landscapes with all sorts of animals at every corner, elephant and rhino, and of course you also then start to learn that elephant maybe weren't in all the areas all the time, and they were transient across many of the landscapes. I'm also fascinated too by the level change in the seas and what we could experience if we realized that some 10,000 years ago our coastline was far out to sea to where it is now. Oh, to be able to explore that and understand the history. From me, Tim Neary, have a super week. And now, hopefully, you know where the Bateleur comes from.
The Nature Journal supports the sustainability of our planet, its people and prosperity. Brought to you by SAPI, a leading global specialized cellulose, paper and packaging company. For more information, visit www.sapi.com. SAPI, inspired by life.